A while back, I had a crazy idea for a new community-driven zine dedicated to the craft of modern sword and sorcery. You might remember this video where I talk about the merit of hand-making zines to share your short fiction. I then opened up submissions to viewers like you. A month later, I had a full issue and 100 pages of prose. I called it Mordschlag, which means murder stroke, a brutal form of swordsmanship where you pummel your opponent with the crossguard and pommel. It's the perfect word to encapsulate the attitude of sword and sorcery that I love. Thought I would just print out a few zines for the contributors and give out a free ebook. I thought that was the end of it. Then people kept asking me about Mordschlag, more than anything else I've ever published. I spent some time poring over issues of Tales from the Magician's Skull, New Edge Sword and Sorcery, my old Dungeons & Dragons books, and this beautiful copy of The Magic Goes Away by Larry Niven that I found at a Goodwill. It's just filled with crazy art. I wish more things like this existed. This is such a cool little book. And then I put my nose to the grindstone and I let my imagination go wild. I started sharing some images of the designs and people started to get really excited. So I did what any rational business-minded creative would do. I listened to my readers and I made Mordschlag a real magazine, an actual printed product that people can get their hands on. Not only is it a space for new sword and sorcery writers to cut their teeth, but it's also a place where they can share pages with the greats of our genre. Y'all, this is so exciting. I'm James, an author, editor, and now the publisher of Mordschlag, Sword and Sorcery magazine. Probably the coolest project I've ever embarked on. And it's all because of you. What started as a passing thought on a lunch break has turned into something of a watershed moment for the Arcanist. We're about to launch Mordschlag and the 2026 issues of the Literary Fantasy magazine on BackerKit, and I've never been so pumped for a launch. But making a brand new magazine from scratch is no easy task, even for me who's made them before. So I want to review at a high level the steps that I took to turn Mordschlag from a daydream to a paperback, and why creating a publication and sharing work from other writers can be one of the best decisions of your writing career. The very first thing I did was come up with the cover concept. Typically, this should be one of your last steps when creating any type of publication, but for me, it helps create a window into the future where I can imagine a tangible result. I then brought this concept to my most popular video to date, which was lightning in a bottle. I was just talking about things I wanted to talk about, and it resonated with you guys. Now, like I said, Mordschlag had a really small scope back then. I didn't think anything of it, and I thought it was going to be a one-and-done thing, and that was it. But then somehow I received 50 submissions for that first issue of Mordschlag. That was my first sign that it was something more than I gave it credit for. For reference, in the entirety of 2025, I received 250 submissions for the Literary Fantasy magazine. In 1 week, I got 1/5 of that for Mord. Since Mord was just an experiment at this point, I went through the submissions on my own without the help of my submissions readers team, and that was a challenge, and honestly, a bit grueling. I had a very clear picture of what I wanted to feature in issue 0, so I was pretty harsh when I was slimming through the submission pile. There was a lot of good writing that I had to say no to. There were things that didn't work, and there were things that just quite weren't there yet. This is what you have to determine when you're going through submission piles. You have to separate what are the things that are going to thrill the readers versus things that are just not quite ready yet. A rejection is never a bad thing. Any submission you send is 90 to 99% likely to get rejected by any publication for any reason, so take it with a grain of salt and keep submitting. I had only 3 spots to fill, and I had 50 submissions that were competing for those spots. But I found 7 standout submissions that I shortlisted. Out of those 7, I found my 3 stories for issue 0 of Mord, and since I have other publications, 2 others got accepted for other venues. 5 out of 50 submissions. That's a 10% acceptance rate. And unfortunately, I don't think that my markets will ever be so generous again. The more submissions there are, the lower that rate becomes. There's only ever so many spots. In the month of June, we opened up submissions again for further issues of Mordschlag, and we received over 400 submissions between all the genres that we look at. I think about 1/3 of those were Sword and Sorcery, and so that's almost tripling the original submission volume of that first conceptual issue. My other magazine, TLFM, is very organized and plainly presented. For Mordschlag, I wanted to take a leap, to do interesting things I might not do otherwise. I wanted a 4th story for issue 0 that was a crossover. So I reached out to Lee Patton and we tried something we've never done before. We took turns writing a short story featuring some of my characters exploring ancient ruins in his setting. We aimed at 5,000 words, and the story clocked in at 9,100. A novelette, don't you know? Issue 0 already had an 8,000 word story and a 10,000. This opened the door for another quirk that makes Mordschlag stand on its own. Most Sword and Sorcery magazines only allow up to 6,000 words, yet the classic stories thrive around the 10 to 12,000 mark. I often see writers lamenting how few markets there are which accept long-form work. Now, Mordschlag is another place where you can send those 10,000 word plus novelettes. With the stories chosen, I began to refine the presentation. I redesigned the cover, taking a high contrast black and white image from Diego Castro, who is absolutely excellent, by the way, and with his permission, I recolored the negative space to red. Not just any red, but a shade that might be found on the Dungeons & Dragons basic box of the 1970s. I looked around at these old products, and I've always loved how the rulebooks and adventure modules were multicolored. They look so interesting on a shelf. Yet again, I looked to Goodman Games and referenced the coloration for their 5e conversions of classic TSR adventures. And I decided to make a 4-issue pattern. Issues number 0 is red, 1 is blue, 2 is yellow, and 3 is purple. And then we'll start over for issue 4. It adds just a bit of needed color to the black and white interior. And then you can put them on your shelf with your OSR books, and they'll look right at home. The inside is my favorite, and I went wild with it. I used a combination of sans serif headers and serif body text, common in old school D&D books, and I ensured every story has an illustration that takes over an entire spread, and at least a half-page introductory image. I filled out any blank space that I saw with excellent artwork. Speaking of D&D, an interesting column in the Tales from the Magician's Skull was their Monster Pit, which featured a bunch of monsters pulled from the stories and ready to play in Goodman Games' flagship game, Dungeon Crawl Classics. While I was studying the market for similar magazines, I realized no one else is doing this anymore. The original run of Tales from the Magician's Skull only lasted 12 issues, and since then, no one else has attempted to bring back the Monster Pit. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I began my writing career as a freelance game designer for 5th edition D&D. Now, I've long since moved on from 5e, but last year at Gen Con, I had an excellent time playing Shadow Dark RPG by Kelsey Dion of the Arcane Library, and I recalled that they had a very incredibly generous third-party license. So I contacted the Arcane Library, ensuring that my idea was in line with the spirit of their license, and they gave me the go-ahead. I added to Mordschlag my own take on the Monster Pit. Menagerie Macabre will be found at the back of every issue of Mordschlag Sword and Sorcery magazine, featuring not only monsters pulled from the fiction and ready to play in Shadow Dark, but 2-page adventures utilizing the new monsters. This was a really exciting thing to be able to do because I've just been itching to get back into TTRPG design. Now, Shadow Dark is a game I don't have a whole lot of experience with, but I've played a few sessions of it in the last year, and I dove deep into how monsters and adventures are designed, and I'm really excited to be able to get back into that realm of technical writing, meeting game design. It's a lot of fun, and tying that into fiction that I get to publish is I don't know, something of a dream I didn't really know I had. Shout out to Arcanist author Michael Goh, who wrote Children of Nemea, because he came up with the name Menagerie Macabre. Gotcha, Mike. Mordschlag has truly become a playground for every cool idea I've ever had or adapted from other cool works that I admire. It's a labor of love for the sword and sorcery community. It's full of things that I would love to see out in the wild, and hopefully I can just get it out to as many places as I can. It's a far cry from the professional tone of TLFM, but it maintains the same strict standards of quality. I'm playing with a few other ideas as we finalize these first couple issues. Instead of an editorial note at the beginning like I usually do, I'm going to write my meta commentary from the perspective of Lord Mord, who is a helm that has been punctured by a murder stroke. I believe it was the skull which started the trend, but many sword and sorcery magazines have something of a mascot. And it's a fun tradition that I wanted to follow. Coming next year will be special Mordschlag issues whose covers depict a Mordschlag in action. Those issues will contain a special key to Lord Mord's secret library, which will reveal a hidden story from Lord Mord's past. Whenever you see one of those special covers, look at the immediately previous issues to find the clues. I'm also really interested in publishing recurring characters from returning authors. That's a huge focus for the magazine going forward. I'm working to simultaneously open the doors for newcomers and then highlight veterans of the genre and give cool original characters a consistent stage to show off. I'm so excited for Mordschlag. Seriously, I have never had so much fun designing a publication. And it means the world to me that this one is working for so many people. Now, I've long said that becoming a publisher has been the best decision of my writing career. And I think that there might be something to this for indie authors going forward. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that you need to do what I did and take, a DIY zine and expand it into like a real crazy product that's going to be going to traditional printing and doing all sorts of manufacturing and distribution. I'm not saying that, but if you can find a way to get in touch with other writers and maybe form some sort of coalition of writers and creatives and work together to figure out the whole marketing and outreach angle, we're stronger together. And that's been proven to me time and time again through the connections I've made at the Arcanist, the Chain Story project, which I'm a part of, all of these different ways for writers to connect and be communal. Writing can be such a solitary experience, but it doesn't have to be. If you're just one person screaming into the void, read my work, read my stuff, you're going to have a hard time unless your stuff is like not only excellent, but just hitting at the right time, hitting the right chords. Right. But if you have multiple people, each with their own audiences, and you work together to publish stuff frequently and consistently, and that consistency really is the key to finding any sort of success. I'm not a huge YouTube channel, but the success I've had on here is just because I keep publishing stuff no matter how low the views get or how high they are. I mean, what matters is coming back and giving people something to latch onto that they can count on that's going to make a return. So maybe I'll do a more in-depth video later, but I hope that this video has given you some ideas on how you can take a silly idea you have on your lunch break and turn it into something that can really make a difference in your writing career. Making websites is easier than it's ever been before. I mean, what's stopping you from sharing your short fiction on a blog and talking to a few of your other writers' friends to do the same, to publish your stuff in little digital issues and send them out to emails? Even if it's only like 10 people who are your friends, that's how I started too. And now we're making a magazine that's going to traditional printers. And so anyway, that's all to say, if you are interested in checking out Mordschlag Sword and Sorcery magazine, it will be available first on BackerKit tomorrow, Friday, July 24th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Early bird backers and followers will receive free bookmarks with some excellent artwork from Anastasia Patton that's featured in the first issue of Mordschlag, and you'll have the opportunity to pick up every book that the Arcanist has ever published at a reduced price. I hope to see you there. This is the Arcanist event of the year. Thank you so much for your support, and thank you to all the people who nudged me into believing that Mordschlag was something worth doing, because now I think it's my favorite thing I get to do. Thank you. Have a wonderful time. Keep writing, keep submitting, and get your friends to publish stuff with you. Take your writing into your own hands.